I am so happy today. I have Amy Todisco with me, and she has a very interesting background. And I connected with her. Anyone who is an organic farmer, I love to connect with because they're the ones that are producing the foods for us. And I know when I made the switch to organic, and just even being able to trust the labeling and what actual or if they were living up to the standards, things like that, uh, I found it very difficult. So if any chance where I can actually connect with the actual producers, I am going to take that. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
And so tell me, I heard your story. You actually grew up in New York
New
and
York City,
yeah,
the Big Apple.
the Big Apple, and
Yep,
now you are an organic farmer in Vermont.
correct.
A
Like night and day.
switch. So
Right. Yeah. So I was a plant out of place in New York City, and I dreamt of living in some kind of a beautiful landscape. I wasn't quite sure where, but I did get to come to Vermont as a kid for skiing. And I had kind of an unusual home life in that my mother was very interested in this nutrition guru, Adele Davis, and my stepfather, Ron, was a chef, and we made all of our own food from scratch. And I really started cooking, I think, at around the age of 8. And so we ate really good food. And my stepfather, unfortunately, my stepfather and my mom divorced at one point, and he moved to Connecticut and started gardening. And I remember that he had plants all over the inside of his house, but also had his own, vegetable garden outside with a few herbs and composted. So that was an early inspiration because he would take the food that he harvested right into the kitchen and make a meal. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And then I also had a relative, my great aunt Jojo, who lived in Morgantown, West Virginia, and she grew most of her own food and traded for things that she didn't have, like chickens and eggs. And I still remember the taste of her beefsteak tomatoes sliced with a little bit of salt that we would go for Sunday dinner. And she also grew herbs and made soap in the basement. I remember seeing herbs drying, hanging from the ceiling, and I thought, oh, I'm going to do that one day. So I spent a bunch of years after New York. I went to college. I basically didn't turn back, but then I stayed in Massachusetts for a bunch of years. And when I was 1992, when I was pregnant with my daughter, and I'd been shopping at health food stores for ages, I came upon this little paperback book called The Non-Toxic Baby. And I think I just skipped over my story about being 16 working at the health food store. But anyway, so the big aha moment was really when I was pregnant. And so I saw this paperback book, and I'm standing there in the aisle reading through it, and my jaw drops. I cannot believe that there are toxic chemicals in everyday household products like shampoos and
yeah,
paints and cleaning products and carpets and pretty much everything that we purchase and bring into our homes. And so, especially being pregnant, I felt really vulnerable. And then I started reading about how nobody's really protecting us. Like in the US, we have so many chemicals in our consumer products and about 10,000 in food versus Europe that has maybe 300 to 400 synthetic chemicals in their food. So, I mean, dramatic difference. And then I started to get into that whole rabbit hole of, oh, wow. So there's all of these agencies that are supposed to be protecting us, but they really aren't. They're really protecting the manufacturers. And there's loopholes that they can get around to, allow ingredients in foods and consumer products that really shouldn't be there. And like I said, are banned in other countries. So I did this whole deep dive of figuring out what's going on and what do I need to do to protect myself and my family. And so I did a complete clean out of my home. I didn't have a lot of toxic stuff in there, but I made sure that everything that was in my house was natural and organic. But that wasn't so easy to figure out. Even today, it's like you said, there is a lot of greenwashing, a lot of marketing that makes a product look and sound like it's great. Maybe it's in lovely earthy packaging, or, the food says natural or free
Oh,
range. And I realized, oh my gosh, I did a deep dive of 100 labels, and well, I'd say one third of them are completely useless. One third of them are somewhat useful, and about a third of them actually have meaning. So that was a shock.
yeah.
Just trying to figure out what to replace my,
Well, trying to
different
find
products.
like I got triggered when you said natural, the label of natural foods, and then they like trying to find unadulterated food.
Exactly.
So difficult, and they
Yes.
always have to like put in that natural ingredient, and
Well, because, yeah, and they do that purposely because they know that many consumers equate natural with organic. And organic versus certified organic are also two different things, right? There's different levels of what organic actually means. Certified organic means that it has to be 100% organic, with the exception of natural flavors, which I learned recently, actually. I had kind of skipped over this, but natural flavors, if they don't have, let's say, organic vanilla bean, they can use a vanilla flavor, and that may be synthetic. Probably not toxic in a certified organic product, but for sure, if it's in a conventional, processed food, most likely it's, artificial synthetic stuff that's most likely toxic. So, I mean, even 30 years down the line, which I've been, doing this for 30 years, I'm still learning new things. Like when I did the label analysis, I realized that wild caught on my tuna fish can didn't actually mean anything unless it had the MSC label logo, which is Marine Stewardship Council. So it's
oh,
amazing.
and that's the organic gardening, organic farming, and for me, just growing my so that peace of mind, you know what's going into your food. It's
Right. And that's a big deal because there are, big ag organic farms, which I think are suspect. I mean, when we see a name brand banana being grown both conventional and organic, how do we really know that the one that has the organic sticker actually wasn't sprayed with anything, right? And then some of the bigger, like there's a big dairy that has organic milk, but they've been found to not necessarily be following the rules. So all the more reason to grow your own, or, go to a local farmer's market or local organic farms, because some people also think that local is the same thing as organic. And you can have local organic farms, but just a local farm doesn't mean they're not using glyphosate and GMO seeds and all that kind of stuff.
get to know your farmers, get to know your
Absolutely.
producers. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm sure you would love to talk to any of your customers
Oh,
and
absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things we really enjoy about having the farm stand, because we have an open air farm stand and we get a lot of visitors from other places, and in addition to the local folks, which we love. And we have fascinating conversations with people. And we have a bunch of local chefs that come and purchase, even at retail,
oh,
vegetables for their meals. Like we used to sell wholesale to restaurants, but now a lot of them, that are kind of higher end and more devoted to quality don't even care what the price is,
yeah, yeah.
which
Well,
is
that may
awesome.
come to that, if you do have the funds, like even when I made this switch, I was okay. I'm going to it's just organic. I'm had it with this other. And I actually did a cleanse in my body and everything, making sure that my body could take up the nutrients.
Oh,
Because it
interesting.
was more expensive.
Yes.
And it was like, if I'm going to be paying this more expensive fee, I want to make
Yes,
sure I'm getting the most out of it. So
absolutely. That's so smart.
that deep dive there, but, and what a difference it makes.
Yeah,
Really.
and there's a study. I mean, there so far I think there's mostly small scale studies, but they've done studies where they've taken a family, for example, and tested their blood and urine, I think just those markers, that they were eating a conventional diet, and then they put them on an all organic diet. And even within 1 week's time, the markers for the different pesticides that were in their system initially are dramatically reduced, if not gone. So
Yeah.
that tells you something. It's not just marketing, right? But you have to know, who you're buying from. Like you said, getting to know your farmer is such an essential thing.
Yeah. And even too, like with a distribution system now is a little shaky, more so get to know
Yeah,
your local producers and
right. And you know what's frustrating about that too is that many of the supermarket chains, they don't buy the organic local stuff. They're getting it shipped from so far away that it's usually a week old before it even gets to the store. And it makes no sense to me that there's so much red tape because my husband Dave, in the early years tried to get his produce into our local supermarket. And they said it was this ridiculous process of all these different, paperwork that you had to fill out. And even after all that, it wasn't guaranteed. So it's frustrating to see that trying to get good food into a store is not that easy. They'll put the, maple syrup from Vermont in that store or granola made here, but for some reason they don't buy the organic local produce or any local produce.
yeah, I think we were probably very fortunate then that I one of the producers here, he was actually able to get it into our local
Oh, that's great.
co-op grocery store. So
Yeah, that's different. So co-ops and even our local supermarket that's locally owned, they do bring in the local produce, ours included, but the supermarket chains are
yeah,
much harder to deal with.
yeah, yeah. Another reason, start to grow your own.
Exactly, exactly. Because then you really, not only do you have control over what you're doing, you get to grow the things that you like. You're
Yeah,
not using any toxic chemicals, so that's better for you, but it's also better for so many others, right? All the pollinators are not getting poisoned. Um, the land, the water, the soil, the air,
yeah,
so many different factors that make it such a good choice.
yeah. And you're not transporting it. You're getting that nutrients that, is lost through transporting.
Oh my gosh, yes. And there is nothing like it. And I know you know this. There is nothing like picking something fresh from the plant and eating it. And when I bring people onto the farm for the farm tours that I do, they are blown away by the taste. Like some people will say, I don't like kale. And I'll say, okay, well, you want to just taste this just to see, what it's like. And sometimes they a lot of times they begrudgingly say yes. And then they eat it and they're thinking, wow, that's not what I thought kale tasted like. Or, a cherry tomato that you pop in your mouth right off the plant is unbelievable compared to what you buy in the store, even the organic ones in the store, right? It's not even just an organic thing. It's that fully alive with the nutrients and the life energy piece of it that is so amazing.
And that a lot of the produce, it's been bred so for
Oh,
long
yes.
life. So you can't get like some of those. I had what was it? A Hawaiian pineapple tomato.
Oh, yes, we've grown those.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the heirloom ones tend to be so much more flavorful and they typically don't hold up as well in the store on the shelf, and that's why they don't carry them. They want the round tomatoes that are like balls that are so hard that
Yeah.
it's not even tasty, but it stores for a long time. And that's the other thing too is, when something is on the shelf in the supermarket, we don't know what else is on it, right? There's different coatings that they're using and for the conventional produce, they're not supposed to do this for the certified organic, but the spray water can have some kind of a antibacterial that slows down the decay of that produce. But even the organic stuff in some stores are using something called organopeel, which is different than apeel. Apeel is the one that's used on conventional. And then organopeel is supposedly safer, but I don't want anything on my produce because I know it's not benefiting me, the consumer. I know that that's there to make it last longer. So I'm buying something that's older and less nutritious.
Yeah. So let's bring it back down for those that now we've probably convinced a few more people that maybe look into growing your own.
Yes,
Can you give us some tips for organic gardening?
sure. So maybe I should define the difference between organic and conventional, just so folks understand that it's a different animal.
Yeah.
So on a conventional farm, you would have basically dirt that is not alive versus the soil on our farm has all these incredible micronutrients being broken down by these, uh, what are the biological organisms? I'm
Micro,
thinking,
microorganisms.
yes, thank you. Those microorganisms, exactly. And so our task on this organic farm and every organic farm is to grow this healthy soil, because the healthier your soil is, the more nutrients that will become available for the plants that you're intending to grow. And so there's a variety of different ways that we do that. So when I ask people on the, that come on my tours, what do you know about organic? And the first thing they say is, oh, no pesticides. And I'll say, okay, that's correct in a sense. It's no toxic synthetic pesticides, but we are allowed to use biologically based things, whether it's neem oil or, hot pepper oil or hydrogen peroxide and countless other things. So that, I mean, there are definitely times when we're battling different pests, especially as the climate is changing. Things are changing on, things that are coming on weather systems from typically Asia, coming in and infecting our plants. So you're growing this healthy soil, and one of the ways that we do that is with cover crops, right? So there'll be a whole field that my husband plants in something like winter rye, or last year he did sorghum. And that just grows all season, and then it dies back when it gets cold, and then it pops up again, in the spring soon. And then he just plows it back into the soil, because all of those roots that have allowed water and nutrients to go in our rocky clay soil down farther is, helping to feed those wonderful microorganisms. And then the fertilizers that we're not using the fast-acting petroleum-based ones that you can buy at the hardware store. We're using things like compost or dehydrated manures of different animals, whether it's chicken or, cows or horses or what have you. There is liquid seaweed emulsions, fish emulsions. There's all kinds of wonderful things that you can use in your organic garden to help build your soil. So if you're a homeowner, one of the first things you want to do is get your soil tested to see what you have, what you're playing with. And you ideally want your garden to be in a place that has 6 to 8 hours of full sun. But it's important to get your soil tested, because if you're low on certain nutrients, that's going to affect, the way that your plants grow. And so there's all kinds of amendments, as they call them, that you can add, whether it's, even drying your eggshells and turning that into a powder and using that on certain plants that really like that calcium is a cool thing that you can do to add to your soil.
I feel very fortunate that one of my neighbors, she has a big yard, and like we live in the country, so there's no spraying around here or anything.
Right.
And so she cuts she has a big lawn, and she cuts it, but she didn't want it, and she bags it all up, and she was putting it in the landfill. I says, no, save it for me. So
Yes.
I have all her grass clippings, and I put it on actually at the end of the season.
Yep.
And so I've got that layer of grass clippings.
That's wonderful.
That keeps the weeds down too for in the spring coming up. But that breaks down and feeds my soil, and it was
yeah. Well, and even putting wood chips. So I have access to all this amazing food that mostly my husband is growing. I do a little bit of it. I mostly run the farm stand, but I have gardens up here by the house because I love the experience of gardening. I love taking a seed and planting it and watching it grow into, tomatoes or cucumbers or all kinds of stuff. And the cool aspect of, if I'm cooking dinner and I need fresh dill, I can run outside the door and snip some dill and bring it and quickly, turn it into my meal. So there's such a joy of being able to see that whole or be a part of that whole experience of connecting with nature and working with nature using all of these different natural processes, instead of doing the man-made version.
And the abundance that comes from that.
Oh my gosh, it is amazing when you think about how one tiny seed can turn into all of these incredible vegetables. It's really kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, and really that's where, when I really got into gardening, that's where my almost mindset changed. It was like I had more of a scarcity mindset, but then it was like, this is such an abundance. There was so much, and I love sharing with my neighbors,
Yes.
and then they share, if they've got an abundance of something, and
I know exactly what you're talking about. I think about that too. If I'm starting to feel like, oh, a thought of lack, I just look out at nature and I think, oh my gosh, look at this incredible bounty and the interconnectivity of it all and how much there is more than enough for everyone if we do things the right way.
there's a good point there, that really with nature, the way it's built up and everything, and there is more than enough.
Right. And
More than that.
you know what else impresses me is the intricate design of how one thing feeds another and how all these the different systems were so beautifully orchestrated, right? I mean, even thinking about birds singing to wake things up or some of the cool things that I've been learning about. Have you ever seen those? I don't know what the machinery is, but there's some kind of a little uh, electrode or something that can gently clip onto a plant leaf or branch and it plays music based
Oh,
on the vibration of that plant.
I heard that once.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that is incredible. And then even the interconnection of what's going on underneath the soil, right? So trees communicating and feeding each other through the roots or, the mushrooms, the mycelium is helping facilitate. I mean, it's just when you start to look into what's going on, it's absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, the wonders and awe of nature, and that
Exactly.
I feel very fortunate. I actually live right in a forest. And
Oh,
so I
that's
get,
amazing. And you have enough sun to grow food?
well, that was one of my challenges, but I
Okay.
also have, like I've got 45 acres, so most of
Oh,
it is,
wow.
but the front part, it used to be an old pasture. And so I've produced a garden plot on that area, but I've got other different plots all throughout the my my acreage here,
Yep.
and one style of gardening, like forest gardening, and it's just
Oh, yeah.
emulating those layers in the forest.
Right.
To me, it's like because I live here, and like nature is so perfect in its design anyways, but it just to enhance it a little bit and turn it towards what I would like to eat, so I'm putting in different fruit trees, and
Oh,
and uh,
cool.
and actually, like, I live in a it's called a zone 2B, but quite far north.
Okay.
uh but we've got like that really intense summers for the
Yes.
growing period,
Sounds a
and
lot
then
like Vermont.
really long winters, but then I just grow inside. I've got a large indoor garden too. So I'm
Well,
very,
so that's such a good point because, having grown up in New York City, I didn't have the ability to plant anything much except for on one sunny windowsill. And then when I moved out to Massachusetts, at first I didn't have any land, so I was growing again on sunny windowsills, but then I had patios. And then I finally got my first garden in the ground, and that was just amazing. I couldn't believe. And I think I did a fairly large first plot because I was just so excited. But I've also grown things even here in Vermont. I've grown things in a hydroponic system inside the house, which is really cool. So I can grow salad in the winter and have it be fresh. So that's one of the things I teach about in the courses that I offer is how to basically easily grow organic food almost anywhere.
yeah, yeah. And really that's even like sprouts.
Exactly. That's one of the things that's in the course.
If you're an impatient person and you can't wait for all your other garden seeds to sprout and produce, yeah, get them
Oh,
going.
and they're so nutritious, right? Because you think about all that life force energy that's in those seeds because you don't even need to put fertilizer when you're first sprouting seeds. And actually, when you're doing seed sprouting, you don't use any fertilizer. You only need it once it's gotten its leaves, and then you want to assist um, the chlorophyll production and all that and just, make the plant bigger and healthier. But yeah, it's remarkable what value. And actually, even the microgreens, one of the things I've learned is that the broccoli microgreens are one of the best greens you could possibly eat, and also watercress.
Oh, why watercress? I've heard about the
I
broccoli
don't know why, but it's a superfood.
nutrient.
And
Yeah.
actually, so my husband, in addition to this organic farm that he's had for 30 some odd years, for about 10 years, he and a couple of partners started this big hydroponic greenhouse. I don't know if I ever told you about this. At the back end of our farm, there's a half an acre of unbelievable greenery. I mean, I bring people there for the tours at the end of the tour and their mind is blown. They walk into this space and there's all this trays and trays of green stuff growing, and they grow the watercress, a lettuce, and a basil. And so that's one of the things that then I learned about was how hydroponic, if it's done well, without the chemical version of it, is actually a great way to feed the world in places where food can't grow. So imagine a desert, if you have even a source of salt water and get a desalinator like they use for cruise ships, you can actually grow food in these places that are literally a desert, or, other places that are considered food deserts because there's no land or, nothing decent to grow on.
Toxic if there's been chemicals on it. So you
Exactly.
can't put that. Yeah, that the abundance and the possibilities, and it
Exactly.
always starts by taking those tiny seeds. And if you don't have your land to grow on, you can start with sprouting some on your counter,
Exactly.
a container on your deck or
Yep.
patio, and then
Right. And typically I always encourage people to start with something that they really like.
yeah,
So, it's easier to grow cucumbers and tomatoes as long as you stake them so they don't fall over. Lettuce is pretty easy. Basil's pretty easy. Uh, Even arugula, which is also a really good nutritious green. So yeah, I think there's so many possibilities, and people can start small, and then, once they get their green feet, then they can expand.
yeah, yeah. So have you got one more tip for someone that when they're just starting to wet their feet,
Yep.
some of the things to avoid or
Sure. Yeah. So I would say don't go too big too fast, because that can be overwhelming, because you won't necessarily anticipate the amount of weeding that you're going to have to do with a large garden. And utilizing mulches like you did with the grass clipping, that's a great idea, especially if the grass is not, you don't want to use it if it's being sprayed with anything, obviously. But you also don't want to use grass clippings if the grass has gotten really tall and it's already gone to seed, because then you're putting weed seeds into your garden, right? But if you're using those grass clippings as a way to keep the weeds down and protect the soil, that's awesome. I use the wood chips through my pathways in my garden so that I can walk on that and not compress the soil, where I've planted the vegetables that I want. Um, I don't know, everybody has a different situation as far as pests, but I have a lot of animals that can get into my garden: woodchucks, raccoons, skunk, bear. We have a lot of bear in Vermont now.
oh,
In fact, we even had bear harvesting for blueberries last summer. This
oh,
young bear was on its back legs and somehow was carefully picking the blueberries and eating them without breaking the branches, which is pretty
wow.
amazing. So
Yeah.
my point about bringing that up is that at first I didn't use any fencing around my garden, but then I had some strawberries in there and all the little chipmunks got in there and just ate them all when they got ripe. And then, same thing with my kale plants. The woodchucks got in there and ate them before they even became, big enough to eat. They were just nibbling down the seedlings. So you may have to do some kind of a fence situation depending upon where you are. So that's something to consider. And then another thing is think about where you're getting the water if you need to water your garden. If you live in a drought-stricken area, you may want to collect rainwater,
Yeah.
but you also want to think about where's your access to water. So in my case, I got these special hoses that are actually food grade rubber, probably plastic too, that are much better than this typical garden hose. And I have two of them so I can extend it to actually connect down inside the house, and I can take it out and water the garden if I need to. So that's something to think about.
Have you ever heard of those wicker gardens, uh, wicking gardens where for people in more drought conditions where it's like it's got like a water reserve underneath
Oh,
it,
yes, I
and
think I've heard about those.
my friend in Australia shared that about that. And for those that, if you're in a drought stricken area,
Oh, neat.
it holds the water in there
Oh, wow.
better than,
Well, and that's the other thing too, with good organic soils, you're actually holding the water better. I think Rodale did some studies to find that organic farms fare much better in drought conditions. So that's an important thing. And then I was just thinking about, um, what was it? One other thing besides the water, the mulch.
for
Hmm.
feeding your soil, for
Say it again.
eating your soil, for
Oh, eating your soil. And yeah, you don't want to eat like spoonfuls of it, but if
oh,
you get some of that.
feeding your soil.
Oh, feeding. Okay, but actually you triggered a thought. There is
Okay.
actually a study that found that if you inhale or get some of the healthy soil into your system, it actually triggers the serotonin in your brain,
Yeah.
which is
Trees.
kind of amazing. And actually, I just remembered that our stomachs are where 95% of the serotonin is actually produced in our body. So that's kind of an amazing
Okay.
statistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yes, feeding the soil is very important. And that's one of the key elements of an organic farm or organic garden.
Yeah. So now we've kind of looped back to where you were starting about your organic trip for the,
Yes. How I got to Vermont from New York City.
well, no, with the organic, for organic farming, you start at the soil, feeding it.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I thought of the other thing that I was wanting to mention was attracting pollinators.
Oh,
So one of the things that's super important, and it's gotten more challenging as climate change has taken hold. So I'll give you an example. We have strawberries that we grow every year. And because we've had warmer temperatures in May, those plants, or even before May, the plants start to blossom early. And it's often before the pollinators are around to be able to do the work that we need. And, for those that don't know, pollinators actually generate enough, about 1/3 of the food that we eat is, we need pollinators in order to produce that food. So my my husband found that there were all these blossoms and no pollinators, which meant they weren't going to turn into strawberries. And so, being the clever person that he is, he went and purchased feather dusters at the store and came back and feather dusted every day from one plant to the other to, move the pollen as the pollinators would. And
wow.
so that year, our strawberries were the biggest, the tastiest, and the most prolific that we've ever had. It was kind of remarkable. But you want to grow things that attract pollinators too. So I have medicinal herbs in my house gardens that are mixed in with the vegetables and the flowers. So I have things like echinacea definitely attracts them. We even have zinnias and snapdragons and all kinds of different herbs. Sage is a one that attracts a lot of, and thyme, all kinds of different medicinal and culinary herbs tend to attract the pollinators. So that's something to keep in mind because then you can use those things too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that we had one year, we actually had, uh, one of our apiaries, we had them keep a hive on our land.
Yes.
What a difference in the crop production.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So we had a very mixed experience with domesticated bees. We had a beekeeper keeping hives above our house, which is just above the farm. And we thought that was wonderful, even though they would get a little aggressive if you went by with a lawnmower. But then the bees died off for a variety of different reasons, mites and other things. And once those were gone, all of these native bees came back. And actually, the best pollinators are the bumblebees. They are much more efficient than the others, and they do this cool vibration, the buzz thing that they do actually helps pollinate better. And they're the only pollinators that can pollinate our blueberry petals because there's like a bell shape, and they're the only ones that can get that pollen and nectar. So
Yeah.
um, it's very interesting. I was kind of surprised that the domesticated bees were actually in some ways interfering with the native pollinators.
Well, I learned from my apiary beekeeper friend that the honeybees actually will only go to certain plants too.
Oh, that's true.
And that, and it's the other native ones. Like I'd had some Himalayan impatiens growing in my yard,
Ooh,
and it was just full of bees,
wow.
and but no honeybees. And
Oh,
that's when
that's
we had
interesting.
her, and I was like, why? And she says, no, no, they won't. They have certain varieties they like, and I'm sure it's like with
Interesting.
the
Yeah.
native ones that,
Well, and I think one of the really important pieces is that people using herbicides are killing off the bees, right? There's neonicotinoids that are particularly damaging, but even the Roundup products, and I guess there's a new variety of Roundup products that normally the active ingredient is glyphosate, which is a horribly toxic chemical. But now what's considered the inert ingredients in Roundup are seemingly even worse as far as coating the honeybees' hairs and
oh,
killing them. So, you don't want to use any herbicides, but you also have to find out what your neighbors are doing. And hopefully they're not using any, pesticides. One of the things that happened when I lived in Massachusetts is when I actually got started with this whole environmental green living experience. And so once I learned everything that I did, I started sharing it in the local newspaper in the letters to the editor section. So I got this very interesting conversation going. And then I did a big Earth Day event. But the shocking thing was that each year the state came out with a report to tell you how many kinds of cancer were above the state average and ideally, not. But
yeah.
this little seacoast community that I lived in had three types of cancer above the state average. And so people were just shocked and in arms. And so I started a nonprofit. And the main thing that we determined, because we were looking for what environmental causes could be related, and even though there was a power plant in the town nearby that was coal-fired, that didn't seem to be a contributor to these types of cancer, but the pesticide use in this community, and it was kind of a wealthy community, and people had little tiny postage stamp lawns, and you would always see those little signs, the yellow signs, with the child and the dog and the circle with the line through it. And then, so if you wanted to grow organic food in your yard, and the neighbors next door were having their trees sprayed or doing their lawns, you didn't really have much way to protect yourself. So one of the best things that came out of that whole experience was working with the local board of health to tighten up pesticide regulations for that town so that people couldn't just indiscriminately spray whenever they wanted. And it also, raised a lot of awareness. So you have to think about, what's going on around you, especially if there's any farms that are growing genetically modified corn and you want to plant corn, you have to wonder about,
Oh,
if the timing is the same, the pollens could be intermixing and then you can get into a Percy Schmeiser situation.
yeah. Oh man.
You know Percy Schmeiser?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
was very much aware of all that. So
Yeah.
you do even more than just the organic gardening,
Oh, yes.
like your site, the greenlivingnow.com. You're into promoting green living, and so just tell us a little bit about.
Sure. Right. So for me, green living is about reducing or ideally eliminating the toxins in our food, household products, and life, and then also embracing holistic health, strategies to ultimately avoid Western medicine and pharmaceuticals and doctors. And so I've been doing this for as long as I can remember because well, for one, I have some fear of Western medicine based on some experiences I had when I was young. But I wanted to be able to control and take back my power and protect my health. So eating food that doesn't have chemicals is one of the best ways that people can, really enhance their systems because you want a strong immune system to deal with, the things that are coming down the pike, or even just flu season every year. And knock on wood, I don't get sick. I mean, very rarely do my husband or I get sick. And I'm actually 61, so I feel like I must be doing something right. Yeah.
I would never have guessed.
I I know most people think I'm like 45, which makes me so happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I teach people these different strategies, and most of the time now is through my online courses, and I'm launching actually a 12-week clean eating program. So I have a course that will follow, but we'll add all these extra cool activities on the weekly live calls on Zoom. And so I'm actually looking for the 10 people that will be part of that beta program, that will be the people that help me form this course and really get a tremendous transformation for them, using the course materials. And then we'll have some fun things like a virtual tour on the farm, and maybe a cooking demo, and all kinds of neat things that we'll add in to supplement the course. So it's really going to be the way to implement the information in the course. And that goes into things like the labels that we talked about, or how to shop for organic food on a budget, and a little bit about growing.
Yeah.
And so I also have the Green Living Now podcast that goes along with this whole endeavor.
Yeah. You're well entrenched in that. And
Oh,
I
yes.
love that you offer things like that too.
Thank you.
It makes for such a better life when you've got good health, and better for you, better for the planet with
Totally.
organic
And
living.
it got me some amazing opportunities. I actually was hired by Seventh Generation years ago to be the founding executive director of this nonprofit they started called the Household Toxins Institute. And then that kind of led me to getting the technical editor of the Green Living for Dummies book. And then my almost Oprah moment, when I got a call from one of Oprah's producers, and she was actually going to come and visit me in Vermont and interview me about my green living lifestyle, but unfortunately went with a nonprofit at the last minute. So it's been pretty amazing. I've had some really cool media.
You're quite famous then. Or near fame.
A little bit. Close. I'm hoping it gets bigger, because I really want to impact millions of people rather than just thousands, because I feel like this is a calling and a mission.
Yeah, well, you're definitely moving in the right direction. And
Thank
I
you.
appreciate all you're doing there, and that you shared so much with us today. And
Oh, thank you.
people, where's the best place for people to find you? You've got your podcast.
Yeah, so if you just go to the website, greenlivingnow.com, you'll see the links to the courses, to the podcast. There's a bunch of free resources that people can access. I actually have a 7-day quick start guide, organic gardening guide that folks can check out. Then, there's some paid courses. I have a 5-day green living challenge. And if somebody really wants to, get moving faster, take me up on the 20-minute Unlock Your Toxin-Free Life call. We'll spend 20 minutes on Zoom, and I'll figure out, based on what you tell me, as to 1 or 2 things that, people can start with right away to get moving in the direction they want to go.
All right. So there you gave us tips there for starting organic gardening, but
Yes.
go to greenlivingnow.com and you can
Yes.
do so much more. Thank you very much, Amy.
Oh, thank you, Patrice. Appreciate it.